Jesus' name, amen. You can have a seat. Now, how many of us in the room struggle with or have moments in your day, your week, your month, whatever it may be, but how many of you ever have a moment that you think is pretty stressful? Just about all of us, right? Whether it's something that is coming up, like a test or whatever it may be, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's something that happened to you, maybe you know that there's this event coming up and there's some stress and anxiety or whatever it may be, but everyone in the room can relate to the idea that life can be stressful. Stressed out is what we're talking about. Now, one of the things, maybe you can relate to this or not, but one of the things that I find to be very stressful in my life is really large groups of people, right? Like meeting people for the first time. And then to make matters worse, let's say there's a whole bunch of people that I don't know, and it's a large room, and there's a whole bunch of people in that room. Like now I got a lot of anxiety going on inside of me, right? Like I start freaking out. Like, who am I going to talk to? Like, how do you pick which stranger to chat with? I don't know. Like, are they wearing something that you think you like, that you maybe could connect with this person because they seem to be more like you, but how do you pick, right? And like I begin to just kind of wrestle through, what do I do? How do I engage? What are the questions I ask? And I have all sorts of stuff going on inside of my head, right? In a large room, I would rather just have a small group of people that I could sit and chat with, right? Maybe it's just 2 or 3. Then to make matters worse, one of the things that happens to me is that I have social anxiety. Let's just throw that out there. Like that's my anxiety that I have to really wrestle through and deal with. And I may meet someone for the first time, and you introduce yourself, you tell me your name, I tell me yours, or I tell you yours, sorry, and then I forget. Like I don't even hear you. Or like I don't even hear you tell me your name, where you're from, how old you are, whatever it may be. Like all I'm thinking about is the next question. How do I further engage? And I'm just thinking about me, about all my feelings, about what's going on inside of me, and I don't even hear the simple things like your name, right? So I have a bit of social anxiety. Now, there was this time when I was headed to a conference, and at my last church, I had this that I worked at. I oversaw like all of kids ministry, all of student ministries, and so like it was a position in and of itself, and there's conferences for just that position, right? And there was this cool organization that was putting this thing together, and they were only inviting certain people from all around the country, and so I was invited to be at this conference, and it was like there were authors there were like really smart people, and I'm like, why did you invite me, right? Like I'm none of those things. But I was thrilled and excited to go. And so it's in Atlanta. I got to get on a flight. I got to fly down there. I got to get a hotel. And it's like 4 days with the people you don't know. Right now, I had already been, like this was 2 years ago. This was like the 3rd time. There you go. Yep, just hop right over. Yep, you got it. All right. So this was like the 3rd time me going, right? And so I knew some of the things to expect. And I knew the very first thing that we were going to be doing was we were going to go to a dinner before the conference kicked off at 7 in the evening. And so there was this dinner at 6. But then they wanted us to be there at 5. And I'm thinking to myself, why? Like, what's happening at 5? Like, is there a game? Right? No. I mean, I had a pretty good idea. So I'm already thinking, oh, shoot. We're going to stand around with each other and chat. Right? Like, I don't want to do that at all. Like, at least when you go and have dinner, you're at a table and there's like 6 or 7 people and there's food to distract you and you don't have to be the center of attention like the meatloaf can or that person who's talking, and you can just sit and listen and interject every now and then. Like there's some safety there. But now you have a room and you just have to pick. So I'm like, I'm struggling, right? Like, so I'm driving to the airport and I'm thinking about it. I'm struggling over it. I'm like, what am I going to do? And then I'm on the flight, and I'm kind of sweating, like, right, I think it was just warm in there. Probably not. Like, my anxiety was really going in overboard, right? Like, I was really struggling through it. I'm sweating. I'm, like, focused. Like, don't look at anyone. Don't make eye contact. Like, I'm just freaking out. And then, it's like just a couple hour flight, right? And so then I land, and I get a rental car, and I'm driving to the hotel, and I have this thought that pops in my head. Like, what if you were just late, right? Like, no one is forcing you to be there at 5. You could show up at like 5:58, jump in line, get your food, and sit down and have a meal with people, right? Like, I had this thought that pops in my head, and it says, just show up late and avoid the scary stuff, right? And so I'm wrestling with that. I'm driving to the hotel. And it was easy, right? I could have just like gotten to the hotel and unpacked my things and like flip on Sports Center and just like chill for an hour and then make my way over to the conference and get a bite to eat. And some of us in the room can maybe relate to that, or you can relate to the idea that you have something that lingers in your life that creates anxiety or worry. Or maybe there's things in your life that have happened to you and it causes even depression. And you feel alone, and you don't know if you can tell anyone, and even when you tell people, you don't know if it actually helps. And all of us in the room relate to the idea that stress, anxiety, depression, it's real, and sometimes we don't know how to deal with it. And as I'm driving to the airport, it's the easy thing to do is to avoid, and just show up late. And that would have been simple. So for me, even like meeting all of you in the beginning of the year was hard. Like, we did this thing in the summer of this vision night, and we hung out outside, and I'm like, gosh, I need something to do, right? Because otherwise I got to go say hello and forget everyone's names and like not really, and I try, like I do my best and I like struggle through it, but for me it just takes time. Like, for example, I'll share that story later. Anyhow, or like on Sunday mornings, like part of my job on a Sunday morning is to stand out. Like, I probably look goofy, I know I do. So I stand out at the breakaway and edge table waiting for someone to come by and say, hello, I want to talk to you about breakaway or edge. And I'm like, with a smile, just standing there like all Sunday morning, and it's just the worst. Anyhow, my boss is going to see this because I record these. Shoot. Anyway. Or there's the scenario that I just shared with my flight and my trip to Atlanta. Life is stressful. Anything in life can be stressful. Like, not just school or sports or family. Like those are all categories and things, or maybe our future. For those of us especially that are juniors and seniors and we have things that are on our minds about our future, like that can create stress, or not just relationship stuff that happens or drama that's within those relationships. Life can be stressful. Anything in life can be stressful, and everything in life can be stressful. I think we got the point. We got the picture. Stress exists. Have you ever felt pressure to play better, perform better, achieve better? Have you ever had that pressure from somebody, or maybe even yourself? Like, I had no one in my life growing up that told me that you need to be a better this or you need to be a better that. But it was all on me, and I was the one who was always the self-critic. And I still am to this day. I stand on the stage and I have that thing that records, and I am a critic of myself. There's always, maybe you can relate to that, but we can relate to the idea that maybe sometimes there's people that put pressure on us. Do you ever get the not-so-subtle comment from the family that you're not around enough? Or that you didn't do well enough on this thing, or maybe that you're not kind enough, or maybe you were maybe there's those not-so-subtle comments that are kind of floated out into the universe, passed your way, that says something about you. Maybe you feel that. Have you ever felt bombarded with questions about, like we just said, our future? What are we going to do after high school? What kind of college are we going to go to? And maybe you just want the questions to stop because you don't know. And we could go on and on and on, and that's just the big stuff. Those are just the big things that happen in our life, and there's all sorts of little things, like maybe like trying to plan that dramatic promposal, right? Like, guys in the room, you better get started. It's 5 months away. Like, you better get started on the creativity, right? The promposal's coming up, right? And so those are just the little events that happen, but maybe they cause stress. And I know it's goofy, or the class presentation, like the class projects that you have, or maybe you stress about your GPA. because you feel the pressure of having a particular score, or finding a partner for a group project, or finding a way to avoid changing another in front of other people and before and after sports. Like, and I know I just let that fall, but that's a real thing. Some stress about that. Maybe striver's ed. Maybe you're terrified to drive because you think you might swerve and hurt somebody. Right? But here's the thing. What does this do to our attitude? When we find ourselves in a highly stressful situation, when we find ourselves overwhelmed with anxiety, what does it do to our attitudes, or how we engage with other people? When you find yourself in a place where you're overcome with stress, how do you respond to people in those moments? Are you short? Are you rude? Are you kind? I mean, oftentimes, like, our good behavior goes out the door. There's times in my marriage where life can get stressful, right? And we try to work through things and do things the right way. And we have 2 children, and like, we actually had a pretty dramatic morning this morning, right? And there was some events that took place, and I'm dealing with one child, and then this other child's problem came to the surface, and there's like this tension in the home, and then I'm supposed to respond with grace and kindness and patience. And like, I can feel kind of the tension kind of welling up inside of me. And then there's other times where maybe there's just tension between my wife and I have this little kind of fun trick, like thing that I do to kind of take her mind off of it. It's almost like a threat, because she hates this. Like, hey, if you can't deal with the tension, anxiety, and stress like in a kind fashion with me, then I may like just post this on social media. Something, check this out right here. This is maybe lit. Right there. It's right there, I promise. It's coming up. It's not a light bulb. There you go. There you go. It's the worst picture. She hates that picture. It's gross. So here, hold on. There's some context for this, all right? I was a little over, like, heavier than I am now. It was 11 years ago. Yeah, it was 11 years ago. I was in Mexico. I'm sweating, which that's just awesome. And because it's like 100 degrees. And I was in Tampico, Mexico, which is on the coast. A lot of people say it's like the New Orleans of Mexico. Like, it's a really cool town. And anyway, there was this mission organization there that they do a lot of like optometry work and giving eye exams to under-resourced people. And shoot, that's going on social media. Crap. Anyway, sorry, Jen. Anyway, so I found these glasses and I put them on, and I just looked sweaty and gross. So I say, hey, you be nice to me, or I'm going to make that my picture, my profile picture. Because sometimes we need a distraction, and we need to laugh. Right? Like, there's these heated moments, and we just need to, like, chill and laugh. And maybe something breaks the feelings inside. Proverbs chapter 29. There's this man in the scriptures a long, long time ago named King Solomon, and he was considered to be at that time the wisest man who ever lived. And you may relate to him. You don't have to throw that up there yet. The scripture. Let me just. We may all relate to King Solomon. There was high expectation on him, on his life. There was people that demanded his direction. There was people that demanded like leadership from him. They had expectation as to how they wanted him to lead and the decisions they wanted him to make and all sorts of things. There were people that had expectations in such a way that they didn't like the decisions he made, and they thought they could make better decisions, right? I mean, like, the list goes on and on and on. We can relate to some of those things. Yes, we're no kings and queens in the room in a realistic sense, but there are expectations on us all that we can relate to. And King Solomon figured out a way to navigate stress. He figured out a way to handle all of the weight of the world and the people and all the things and the wants that they had put on him and pressed into him. He figured out a way to push through it all. And he did this beautiful thing in all of his writings. He would always compare things. He would contrast things. And in Proverbs 29, this is what he says. Verse 25, he says, "The fear of man will prove to be a snare, The fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. It's this idea that the fear and the worry and the anxiety of man over time can prove to trap you. Have you ever felt like you've been in a position, in a place of stress, anxiety, depression, where you feel like you can't get out? You're like, how do I get out of this feeling? How do I push through? But then he makes the statement and he says, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. And stress can become something we get trapped in. And let's look at this. And it is important that we are clear about stress. All right? Stress is the basic cause of 60% of all human illness and disease. That is mind-blowing. 60% of all human illness and disease is caused, the root of the issue is stress. 6 out of 10 people. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the U.S. 44% of stressed people lose sleep every night. And there are so many more statistics to go on about how damaging and unhealthy and gripping stress can be in our life. 60% of people find themselves ill or come down with disease because they found themselves trapped in stress. They couldn't get out. But Solomon says, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. So what happened in Atlanta? So I'm driving to the airport, and I'm thinking to myself, I could just not show up, right? I could just take my time, chill in the hotel for a little bit and show up at 5:55 and show up for the dinner and go on with my way and be fine. But I chose not to. I said, Aaron, suck it up. And I unpacked my things and I drove over to the conference and I got there on time and I'm sitting in the car and I'm still like, I could just pull up my computer, hotspot it, and send out some emails and do some work for like 50 minutes, right? Like I still have an option to not walk into that building. But I chose not to, and I chose to walk into this building. And just like picture this for a minute. I go in, and it's a really cool like environment. Like they got a cool vibe going on. And I felt very underdressed because it was kind of fancy. And no one told me that it was going to be fancy because there was like little hors d'oeuvres. Not appetizers, hors d'oeuvres, right? Things that I saw that looked really good, but I didn't know what they were. But I was like, they look good, let's try it, right? Well, here's the thing. So you find your fancy hors d'oeuvre, but there's like 100 people in the room. And I'm like, how do I pick who to talk to? Like, who's going to be my new friend, right? Like, I don't know how to do this well. So I'm like, all right, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go get some food because that's an easy task. I'm distracted. Maybe I'll like accidentally bump into someone while we're getting the same food and that'll strike up a conversation, which it did. Cool, right? Like I'm off and going. I'm like making progress and we're eating and we're talking and he's a cool guy, like, tall, good looking dude. Like I could probably chat for a while and I don't know why I just said that. Anyhow, and so we're talking for a bit. And so, anyway, I did something like horribly wrong, where I was like, I wrapped up the conversation. I'm like, that was 10 minutes. And I have 50 more minutes to endure this misery. So why did I end it so short when we were getting along? I did. And so then I'm like, oh no, like, back to square one, and I already have my food, so I can't like get more and bump into another person. And so I'm kind of scanning the room, and finally I see like these 3 gentlemen, like individuals off in this corner, and I was like, all right, that's cool. I like corners because they're like quiet and no one's gonna like bother me. We're not in the center. And so I go and I walk over to them and we start talking, and we introduce her each. And what happens? I don't know their names anymore, right? Actually, I know one of their names. And which is really ironic. Hold on, getting ahead of myself. Anyway, so we're chatting for a minute, and here's the cool thing. Like, all of a sudden I realized that everyone is from Metro Detroit. And I'm like, wow, like we all drove from, like, or flew from different parts of the country, and there's probably only like 5 of us from Detroit, or Metro Detroit, and here's 3 of them, or 4 of them with me there. Like, this was fascinating. And so there was lots all of a sudden that we had in common, and we started talking about like what church we were at and where we were serving, and all of a sudden we had this like amazing conversation. And I'm like, wow, God, like I got on a plane and flew all the way down to Atlanta to this conference, and I was terrified to meet people, and then all of a sudden I tripped into relationships because I was willing to mingle, which I hate that word. But I pushed through it. And one of them is actually, I would say, a good acquaintance. And his name's Tyler. I've remembered his name. The other 2 I don't. I'm sorry. There's a lot of pressure, all right? And Solomon says this, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe. What does that mean? I mean, honestly, as we look at that, what does it mean? When Solomon says, but if we trust in God, if we trust in the Lord, he will keep us safe. Like, what does that look like? What does it mean? And here's another way that we're going to say that this evening is trade your stress for his strength. Trade your stress for his strength. We're going to hand over our stress and our anxiety and our worries. We're going to hand it over, and we're going to receive God's strength. But the journey is really in the answering of the question of what does that look like? How do we get there? How do we actually practice that? And this is the important thing. If you take notes at all, this is where I want you to jump in. We're going to answer the question, how? And the first thing is I believe you need to talk to God. And I know that sounds like super elementary, like, thanks, dude, great evening at Edge. I learned I should talk to God more. But here's the thing, and here's the journey within that, is that I really honestly believe that we need to go to God and we need to say, God, I have this feeling inside of me. Whether it's depression or worry or anxiety or whatever is going on, like God, I want you to help me look inside and identify what is it. What is this thing that is driving me crazy? And it could be something as simple as a test that's coming up. Or for me, it was this social anxiety. And I knew what it was. And I had to name it. And in my conversation with God, I just had to name it. But God, I have this stress or this anxiety, and I worry like crazy as far as how is it going to go. And I'm claiming this and naming this, and God, I need you to somehow give me your strength, as Solomon says. But the very first thing I need to do is have that conversation, and God, help me to name it. What is it? Because I know for a fact what my thing is. And there's other things that cause stress in my life, but this is one of the big ones. I forget people's names because I'm so focused inward in a conversation. And it's such a bummer. Because, I mean, I don't know, maybe if this has ever happened to you, but like I'll forget someone's name and then I'm like, shoot, I see them afterward, like the next week at church or the next function, and I'm like, oh shoot, that person's name. I've met that person, what am I going to do? And you just like find crafty ways to like just have conversation without having to say their name. But here's the really, like, there's times where like all of a sudden my wife is entered into the scene and I should probably introduce them. Like, that's even trickier, right? You got to get a little bit more crafty, a little more creative to figure that one out. Well, there was a student here named Becky. I don't think Becky's here tonight. Becky, no. Yeah, I met her twice, and then we had a leadership, she's on the leadership team, and we had a meeting like shortly. Like, I had already met her twice, and then we had this leadership training meeting, and everyone wanted to test if I knew everyone's names, and I'm like, you guys all didn't even know that this was like my thing, that I really struggle with this. And you're like, let's test him out, right? Let's see if he knows our names. What do we? I was doing really well. I was going around the whole circle, and I couldn't get 2 people's names, but I had already met Becky twice, so I should have known her name. And I just called her by some other name, and she's like, no, my name's Becky. And I was like, close enough. I'm like, no, that's not close enough. You're a jerk. Like, why would you say that? But I've gone to God about this, and I've named it, and I know it, and now I know that this is something in my life that I need to lean into. I can't run away from it. I can't sit in my car and just work instead of going inside and meeting people. I need to push through it. The second thing is we need to talk to people about it. We need to talk to someone about this. You need to talk to others. You can't carry this alone. We not only need the support from people in our lives to help get us out of a trap, But we need the support of people in our lives that can help prevent us from falling into the trap. Right? These are people that can help hold us accountable. Like in that moment when I was driving to the airport and then driving to the hotel, like I should have called up my wife and said, hey, I don't want to go in. Right? I didn't, and like I managed to push through it on my own, but that's one of those moments where I could have reached out to someone. I could have done a phone home thing, right? And got the support from someone. Solomon says another really cool thing in Proverbs chapter 12, verse 25. He says, anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. And it's so simple, isn't it? But it's so real. It's so true. Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word from someone cheers it all up. And what if you're that person in the room that could cheer someone up with just a kind word? Or what if you're that person that's saying, I just wish I had that one person in my life that could give me the kind word to lift me up, to cheer me up? And number 3 is learn helpful practices. And this is probably, it's probably the most important thing we're going to talk about or listen to or hear tonight. This is huge. It's very important. Something that can take your mind off the thing that is causing the stress or anxiety. Figure out what practice works best for you. I'm going to list a few. Maybe it's writing down all the things that are bothering you. Oh, there they are. Maybe it's drawing a picture or using a coloring book. And don't knock it, all right? Don't knock the coloring book thing, because there's a reason why adult coloring books are making a fortune. Those who make them are making a fortune. So there's science, there's study, there's so much that says that it can calm a person down. So, buy some coloring books. Or if you're an artist, you can draw. Maybe it's learning to breathe. And there's these moments in my son's life, my oldest son, who deals with an immense amount of anxiety, where the world just seems like it's falling all around him, and he doesn't know how to get out of it, and he seems so trapped, and he's screaming, and he's like literally having this cry for help, and he just wants to hurt somebody or hurt himself. Like there's these moments that are so intense in his life, and I have to literally hold his face, put my hands right on his cheeks, and I have to say, Otto, breathe. And him and I will just go, we just breathe in and out with each other. Maybe sometimes we need to just stop, hit the brakes, and breathe. Or maybe it's going for a walk or a run. For me, I love to get out into the woods and go for hikes. And it's fascinating to observe in my own life that once I do that, I forget about everything else. I'm just like, what's around that corner? And I like to look for animals, and really it's deer. I always like to see if I can spot a deer out there, and I just find it fascinating. I know, it's weird. Weird fact. This is facts for about Aaron today. Anyhow, but it takes my mind off of whatever's going on. I mean, really, I'm just present. It's amazing. Pieces of permission. That's not even a point, but it's good, though. It's good. Here's the take home. We need to make it a habit. That's the last thing. We need to make all of these things a habit. It's not like a one and done thing. Some of these things in your life will never go away, and they'll always be present, and you need to always be able to push through them. And some of these things are just like circumstances that pop up from time to time. And we can live and we can dwell and we can kind of sulk and just kind of be like, poor me in that moment, or we can push through it. And there's all these things that we can do to help us navigate the anxiety and stress that we all deal with from time to time. The reality is that stress and anxiety is going through the roof more and more every single year. And I think we all can agree with the fact that it doesn't go away yet. We have the ability and the power to push through it and to grow stronger in it. And here's the thought for you. What does it look like to gain God's strength? That the more we make these things a habit, the more that we do it, the more that we go through all these exercises, we work ourselves through these 3 points, we make it a habit in our life. The more that we do that, the more that we grow stronger in our ability to push through stress. right? The more I enter into these scenarios where there's lots of people and I have to mingle with other people, the more that I do it, the more opportunity I give myself, the stronger I become in being able to handle that stressful, high anxiety moment for me. It's like building a muscle. So tonight, this is what I want you to do. I want you to close your eyes for a minute. And I want you to think about that thing. The thing in life that right now, in this moment, you either feel that is overtaking you with some sort of anxiety, or that you're super worried about. Maybe you even feel a little alone and depressed, and you're like, I don't really even know why I feel this way. But I want you to identify that. And together, but not out loud, but just like we're all together in this moment, and that's what I mean by that. So like together, we're gonna just sit here, and I want you to ask God, help me name this thing. And with all of your eyes closed, if you're someone in the room that deals with some sort of anxiety on a regular basis, or stress, or even depression, I want you to stand up. All right, now what I would like for you to do is I'd like for you to open your eyes and look around. So here's the point, guys. We're not in this alone. I don't do this to say, oh my gosh, we all have problems. That's not my goal, all right? My goal is to say that we are not alone. We have a whole room of people in this room that we are dealing with similar things and wrestling with similar things. And the whole hope of the church and the whole hope of Jesus, you can sit for this last moment, and Van, you can make your way up. But the whole hope for the church, the whole hope that Jesus has in coming and bringing life, is that we would link arms with each other. And we don't come just to sing songs and pour out our hearts to God and say, thanks for the high, I feel good, I'm going to go home now. We come corporately to remind each other that we're in it together. So when we land on the second point tonight where it says talk to others, invite someone into your life. Invite someone into your life that you can have the conversation with, that you could pray with, that you could call up at some crazy hour or send a quick text and say, I just need you to pray with me or for me. Or just please know that I'm struggling with this thing that I've already talked to you about, and I just need to hear you. That's the point of the church, that we are better together, that we journey together, that there's this community of people that love each other. Because in Proverbs, it's so true. Anxiety weighs our heart down, but a kind word cheers it up. So may this room right here be a beacon of light to each other. That you are the kind word that cheers each other up. That may no one in this room ever leave feeling all alone. That you know there's someone that cares about you, that wants to do life with you, that wants to journey with you. And I understand the feeling of feeling like no one actually believes or feels that. I feel it too sometimes. That's my whole social anxiety thing. I sometimes wonder if anyone actually wants to have a conversation with me, or if I'm just kind of the person in between, who they really want to talk to. But that person's already talking to someone, so they're kind of waiting. I get it. But please know that we're here, that you are here, because God deeply loves you, and we're called to link arms. And that is a beautiful thing. That is what people look like and say, I want some of that. In a world where stress continues to rise and rise and rise, may we be a people that find peace so that others may find it too. So as we close this service, we're going to sing a new song, and maybe some of you